Welcome to the program. You're with Arise News in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Ahead of the next 30 minutes, all of the global headlines you need to know about. I'm Folake Adesuba. Arise News now begins. Our top stories: Syria has accused Israel of firing missiles towards Damascus airport warehouse. And on day 21 of a partial government shutdown, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signs U.S. federal worker back pay bill. And R&B star R. Kelly denies any sexual misconduct. We're going to start off in the Middle East, where missiles fired by Israeli warplanes has struck a warehouse at Damascus International Airport, causing damage but no casualties, a Syrian military official says. The unidentified official was quoted by Syrian state media as saying Israeli aircraft coming from the south fired several missiles at areas near Damascus about 45 minutes before midnight. He says Syrian air defense units shot down most of the missiles, but gave no details on other sites targeted. There was no immediate word from Israel, which rarely comments on such attacks. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will grant asylum to a Saudi woman fleeing alleged family abuse. Earlier today, Thailand's immigration police chief said 18-year-old Rahaf Mohammed Al Kunun had left on a flight headed for Canada. Al Kunun was stopped last Saturday at a Bangkok airport by immigration police, who denied her entry and seized her passport. She barricaded herself in an airport hotel room and launched a social media campaign that drew global attention to her case. Today, Trudeau avoided answering a question about what the case would mean for Saudi relations, but he said Canada will unequivocally always stand up for human rights and women's rights around the world.
Has been closely following the situation with Ms. Rahaf Al Kunun. Our diplomats in Thailand have been engaged with our partners and allies, particularly with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. The UNHCR has made a request of Canada that we accept Ms. Al Kunun as a refugee, and we have accepted the UN's request that we grant her asylum. That is something that we are pleased to do, because Canada is a country that understands how important it is to stand up for human rights, to stand up for women's rights around the world, and I can confirm that we have accepted the UN's request. Canada has been unequivocal that we will always stand up for human rights and women's rights around the world. This is part of a long tradition of Canada engaging constructively and positively in the world, and working with our partners, allies, and with the United Nations. And when the United Nations made a request of us that we grant Ms. Al Kunun asylum, we accepted.
Elsewhere, members of the U.S. Congress called for the protection of press freedom around the world as they honored a U.S.-based Saudi columnist who was killed inside his country's consulate in Turkey in October. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Representative Adam Schiff of California, and Senator Mark Warner of Virginia were among those attending the event yesterday at the Capitol, marking 100 days since the slaying of writer Jamal Khashoggi. Pelosi said Congress is committed to seeing that the people responsible for his killing are held accountable.
Our moral responsibility to safeguard the lives and liberties of journalists, both at home and abroad. And if we decide that commercial interest should override the statements that we make and the actions that we take, then we must admit that we have lost all moral authority to talk about any atrocities, anywhere, anytime. The freedom of the press is the guardian of the gate of our democracy. Whatever other violations the government or others may exert, if the press can talk about it, freedom exists. So an assault on Khashoggi was an assault on our democratic principles and our democracy, really. And we in America have to stand up very strongly so the rest of the world sees that regardless of any commercial transactions, whatever they may be, or even strategic location, is not a license to kill.
Each death and each imprisonment is a blow against freedom and accountability. I fear this growing trend portends a world in which autocracy and corruption are on the rise and where the ideals of freedom, democracy, and human rights are brought to heel. We will not stand idly by, not when Jamal Khashoggi is lured to ruthless death, not when journalists in Mexico are shot in the streets, not when an American journalist, Austin Tice, is believed alive and held hostage in Syria for 6 years. Jamal's life was snuffed out in a despicable act of brutality, but his voice carries on with all of us, and it is incumbent on all of us who remain to carry on his work, expose those who spread falsehoods, and support the cause of freedom of the press.
But I think it is fair to say, in frankly, a bipartisan fashion, that there's never been a time before in American history where we've not had an American president who also stands for those values. But today, we don't have those kind of statements coming out of this White House. Today, when we see these kind of tragedies, we don't have a strong statement from an administration reaffirming the rights of a free press, both domestic and on an international basis.
Meanwhile, U.S. federal workers got pay statements offering nothing but zeros, the most tangible and painful sign yet of a 3-week partial government shutdown that has paralyzed Washington and is sure to become the longest closure in U.S. history.
To be here to sign this legislation, which is about fairness to our federal workers, our public employees. It should not be necessary. We shouldn't have a shutdown. But since we do, we want to ensure that our public employees, some of them are working without pay, some of them are shut out from working, but all of them will be assured that they will be paid. And in fact, we have given many paths to alleviating this, opening up government. In fact, what we did, I think it's important to remind that in the House, we had put on the floor the legislation that had already been passed by the Senate, the Republican appropriations legislation.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump said he would sign a bill passed by Congress that would guarantee that federal workers would get paid immediately after the shutdown was over. His comments came during a roundtable at the White House where he reiterated he had no choice when it came to the border.
I appreciate their service to the country. They are incredible people, the federal employees that we're talking about. But many of them agree with what I'm saying and what the people in this room who are experts are saying. They don't want to see people killed because we can't do a simple border structure. And I appreciate their incredible support. I was watching this morning and reading this morning that so many people are saying the president is doing what's right, and even though it's affecting us short-term, temporarily, as you know, a bill was just passed, which I will sign in Congress, making sure that everybody's going to be paid immediately upon when this is over. But I just really appreciate the fact that they have handled it so incredibly well. And many of them agree with what we're doing. We have no choice. I'd rather not do it because this is something that Congress should easily do. This is something that the Democrats should do. And I don't want to give an easy way out of something as simple as this. Not only simple, it's easy, and it's going to secure our, we have a country that is under siege. You could actually, a lot of people don't like the word invasion. We have a country that's being invaded by criminals and by drugs, and we're going to stop it. So I want the Democrats to come back to Washington and vote.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, will testify publicly before a House committee next month in a hearing that could serve as the opening salvo of a promised Democratic effort to scrutinize Trump, his conflicts of interest, and his ties to Russia. The House Oversight and Reform Committee announced that Cohen will testify before that panel on the 7th of February, a little more than a month after the Democrats took the House majority. The hearing marks the latest step in Cohen's transformation from a trusted legal advisor to the president to a public antagonist who has cooperated extensively against him.
we're going to make sure that we do absolutely nothing to interfere with the Mueller investigation. That is very, very important to us. But I can tell you that as far if Adam, he's right, so that's fine. But we're going to have a lot more comments coming out later on. Right now, my major concern is making sure that our government is opened up. I think people need to, the American people all have an opportunity to hear from him, from Mr. Cohen, and their representatives, that is representatives on the Republican side and the Democratic side, will have an opportunity to ask him questions. And I think the American people will see that it did matter, that their votes did matter, and that we opened it up for transparency.
We welcome his testimony before the Congress. It's my understanding that he doesn't intend to address the Russia investigation in his open testimony. He is going to need to answer questions about it, and we're in contact with the attorney. We hope that he will come in voluntarily to testify before the Intel Committee in closed session. So we have been in negotiation with that about that for some time, and we hope to wrap that up soon. He hasn't agreed, but I think there's good likelihood. I hope that he will. We would like to have him come in voluntarily testimony, but at the end of the day, there are questions he needs to answer. He testified once before our committee. He wasn't fully forthcoming. He's accepted responsibility for that, but that has raised questions that we need answered.
In other news, a U.S. Roman Catholic priest who pleaded guilty to sexually abusing 2 boys and making one of them say confession after the assault has been sentenced to 2.5 to 14 years in prison. David Lee Paulson was sentenced in Jefferson County after pleading guilty in October to corruption of minors and child endangerment. Paulson is one of 2 priests charged as a result of a damning Pennsylvania grand jury report that named almost 300 predator priests accused of abusing more than 1,000 victims over 7 decades in 6 of the state's dioceses.
This was served upon David Paulson, a priest who preyed on children for his own sexual gratification. Paulson was just sentenced by Common Pleas Court Judge John Foradora to 2.5 to 14 years in prison for his horrendous crimes. As some of you know, I was in the courtroom with our team and this group of survivors, and it was a powerful moment to see justice brought down on that predator priest. 8 months ago, I announced criminal charges recommended by a grand jury against David Paulson, a Catholic predator priest, for the sexual abuse of 2 boys in the Diocese of Erie. A diocesan priest abusing victims who were just 8 and 15 years old when their abuse began. He assaulted one of the victims more than 20 times, usually at church rectories or after Mass on Sundays, where one of the boys was an altar server. Paulson weaponized his faith and used the tools of his priesthood to abuse children here in Pennsylvania. He even made one victim go to confession and seek forgiveness for being sexually assaulted. The priest who heard that confession was Paulson himself. The stiff sentence imposed today on Paulson sends another very clear message here in Jefferson County and all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and indeed I believe people across this country are listening, that the era of institutional cover-ups has ended. We will not stand for it in the office of Attorney General. The church, putting its own reputation above the needs of children, we simply will not stand for it.
All right, time for a short break now, but do stay with us. Plenty more still ahead on Arise News Now.
As a fashion writer, I know how quickly trends are created and changed. In business, it's no different. To stay ahead, I needed a plan flexible enough to meet my changing communication needs. More Business 2.0 didn't just give me voice and data in one package. I got a whole lot more. With more business, setting up my website was no problem. But I'm not just a fashion writer. I also own a home decor store before I decided to open an accessory store. With my customized More business plan, managing my staff's communication is easy. No matter how frequently they come, oh, they go. With 9mobile's new online self-service this week, I could adapt my plans to include this.
From 2,000 Naira, choose a business bundle, customize your staff's voice and data lines, and enjoy a variety of add-on business services. Dial *200*5# now to subscribe. More business.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. In today's fast-moving, fast-changing world, you need a financial partner that understands your unique expectations. A bank with presence in major financial centers across the world, with the enabling platform to facilitate seamlessly, whenever, wherever, however. A bank with best-in-class financial solutions from a superb combination of technology and human touch. For easy, fast, and secure banking that creates real value. Turning dreams into reality is now in your hands. People, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
This is Arise News, now live from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I'm Folake Adesuba. Now, the defeated opposition candidate in DR Congo's presidential election is vowing to challenge the result in court. Martin Fayulu told reporters the people of the nation deserve to know the truth of the election, which he said had led to a coup. Another opposition candidate, Felix Tshisekedi, was declared the winner amid accusations of a power-sharing deal with the outgoing president. Several deaths and injuries have been reported in the wake of the results. Meanwhile, a 5-day-old baby is a surprise bright spot in Democratic Republic of Congo's deadly Ebola outbreak, as the country's health ministry called her the first child born to a mother who has recovered from the virus. Baby Silvana was born Sunday at an Ebola treatment center in Beni, a troubled city where rebel attacks have threatened health workers' attempts to contain the outbreak. Her mother was infected with the virus and admitted to the treatment center that is supported by the World Health Organization in December 2018. Historically, there have been very low survival rates for pregnant women infected with Ebola and for their babies. In this outbreak, however, because of pediatric care of infants, there have been several who have survived.
I had a good birth. I thank God for allowing me to have a safe birth. Now, I recovered. I do not have any diseases, and the baby was born healthy. I am very grateful for the great work that the team is doing. The mothers should not be afraid of dying from serious diseases. They are doing a good job at the hospital and the clinic.
We did a sample on the newborn. We took a sample from the woman who gave birth. We took a sample in the amniotic fluid, which made us fear a process of release of the virus. And after PCR lab testing, actually the result came back negative. The reason why, we said to ourselves, was surprising and intriguing from a scientific point of view.
All right, looking into business news now. Prosecutors in Japan have indicted former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn with 2 fresh charges involving financial crimes. Mr. Ghosn, who has been detained since November, was charged with aggravated breach of trust and understating his income. He had already been indicted on a separate charge of underreporting his pay over 5 years. Mr. Ghosn, whose detention has drawn some criticism, denies all wrongdoing. His lawyers said they would apply for bail, but experts say this request is very unlikely to be granted. The new charges will likely keep the 64-year-old in prison until his first trial, according to his lawyers. And Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos and his wife Mackenzie are divorcing, ending a 25-year marriage that played a role in the creation of an e-commerce company that made Bezos one of the world's wealthiest people. The decision to divorce comes after a trial separation, according to a statement posted on Wednesday on Jeff Bezos' Twitter account. He and his wife both signed the announcement, which ended with a vow to remain cherished friends. Left unanswered was one of the biggest sticking points in any divorce: how the assets amassed during the marriage will be divided. We're headed to a break now, but do stay with us. Sports and entertainment are right up next.
There's an old saying in Nigeria: thoughts and dreams are the foundation of our being. At First Bank, we dare to dream and strive to innovate, continuing our over 120-year tradition to be the first to offer new products and services to our customers. You first. First Bank.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. In today's fast-moving, fast-changing world, you need a financial partner that understands your unique expectations. A bank with presence in major financial centers across the world, with the enabling platform to facilitate seamlessly whenever, wherever, however. A bank with best-in-class financial solutions from a superb combination of technology and human touch for easy, fast and secure banking that creates real value. Turning dreams into reality is now in your hands. People, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
This is Rise News Now, live from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I'm Folakia Adesuba. Now let's dive into the world of entertainment. R. Kelly's attorney, Stephen Greenberg, says the R&B star never knowingly had sex with a minor, sexually abused any woman, or held anyone against their will. He says the R&B star denies all allegations of sexual misconduct made by women in the Lifetime documentary series Surviving R. Kelly. Kelly has been dogged for years by allegations of sexual misconduct involving women and underage girls. Greenberg defended the Grammy-winning recording artist after a prosecutor in Chicago this week publicly urged victims to come forward.
I've not looked at all of the women in the documentary and had him see who he knows and who he doesn't know. There may be women who are in that documentary who he's never met. There may be women that he met one night when he was drinking and partying, and there may be women in it that he lived with for a period of time. All that matters is that whatever any of them are saying didn't happen. Look, to the best of Mr. Kelly's knowledge, he has not had a relationship with an underage girl. I know he was once married to someone who, it turns out, was underage. She lied about her age. If he's in the course of being on the road, met a groupie and she lied about her age, she certainly always appeared to be an adult. He never knowingly has been with a minor. I can tell you that is absolutely a false accusation. People are saying that they told him they were underage and he said okay.
The long gesticulating Aretha Franklin biopic Respect is going ahead, with stage director Liesl Tommy set to direct. MGM has announced that Tommy will helm the film, which is to star Jennifer Hudson. The Dreamgirls actress was cast as the late Queen of Soul in January 2018 after Franklin selected her for the role. At the time, Hudson performed a medley of Franklin's songs at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy bash. Kelly Khoury, who penned 1991's Thelma and Louise, will write the script. Looking into sports now, starting with something huge in tennis. An emotional Andy Murray said that the 2019 Australian Open could be his final event as a player, as he contemplates retirement due to a long-standing hip injury. The former world #1 player struggled through a practice match against Novak Djokovic on Thursday ahead of the tournament starting in Melbourne next week. Speaking at a news conference in Melbourne, the 31-year-old said he was unsure he would be able to play through the pain for another 4 months.
not feeling good. Yeah, obviously been struggling for a long time. I've been in a lot of pain for, well, it's been probably about 20 months now. I've pretty much done everything that I could to try and get my hip feeling better, and hasn't helped loads. I'm in a better place than I was.
That can't be easy for him at all. Well, that is it for this edition of Arise News Now. Thank you for being a part of the program. Be sure to stay with us on the channel as we give you the updates. I'm Folake Adesuba from the whole team in Abuja and London. Goodbye for now.